Om Sahana Vavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shantihi. Gurur Brahma Gurur Vishnuhu Gurur Devo Maheshwaraha Gurureva Param Brahma Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Welcome to today's session on Pancadashi Chapter 1, Tattva-viveka. Let's recap for a second. The first thing we had to do in this text was go through and analyze how my true nature has to be the nature of existence, Sat, consciousness, Chit, Ananda, unmitigated bliss. There is no other way. Existence, we went through the argument of how there has to be a substratum to track any kind of change that takes place. In this fleeting, changing world that's constantly in flux, there must be that existence principle. The source that I come from, ultimate source, has to be that existence as well. Consciousness. You ask a doctor, how do you tell a body is living? They can go through vital signs, and they can go through various ways of looking at those markers. But at the end of the day, even with all their tools, what is that spark that gives life? That's still unknown. At most, we can say that because that spark is there, there's a heartbeat or there's movement, things like this. We still don't know what that spark is. Our rishis have surmised that that is that consciousness principle. Then Ananda, ultimate bliss. The misconception here often is that, okay, the experience and the happiness that I experience on a daily basis is at one level. This is just happiness on steroids, pretty much. That's not the principle here. What gives me sorrow is finitude, limitedness. When I find that there is a date of birth and therefore a date of death, that is a finitude that brings sorrow. Change is sorrow. Ananda is closely linked with the word ananta. Ananta meaning infinitude, where there is no end to my existence. That itself is the nature of bliss. Where there is no other. Think of any fear that we harbor. It's because there is an other, there is an unknown, and because of that unknown, there is a fear for my persistence and my well-being. Because I see that I, as I, this assemblage right here, I see they, I see them, I see he, she, it, that, all of these other beings come about because I see myself as I. Ananda is where there is no longer that limited I. Therefore, where is the other? Where is fear? Where is there any mitigation to any kind of joy that I have? That was the first part of Pancadashi. Then we went through a triad and explored Jiva, Jagat, Ishvara. Jiva is that limited individual. I am a Jiva, you are a Jiva. Not only in this lifetime, this Jiva has had many lifetimes. Then, because this Jiva needs a playground to exhaust its vasanas, there is this Jagat, this entire creation. If there is a creation, it must have a creator, an ordainer of making it go around, giving it some order. That is that Ishvara, Bhagavan, Paramatma. So we went through this triad. Now begins the real fun part. We get to use various frameworks at this point to go into exploring what is my true nature. One framework we saw at the very beginning was going through Sat, Chit, Ananda in detail. Now what we find, I want to summarize it in today's lesson. We'll go into the shlokas next time, just so we have an understanding and we're not slogging through shloka after shloka. That can get tiresome if we don't have a full picture in the beginning. So what are two topics that we look forward to next? The first topic is called Pañcīkaraṇam. Pañcīkaraṇam refers to the way elements are grossified. Now, what's the principle behind all of this? When it comes to this entire creation, and by this entire creation, I mean those things that are my surroundings in this entire universe, including my assemblage as this ahankara right here, with my body, my mind, my intellect. Anything outside of that atma, that substratum, anything beyond that, we're considering this jagat. Okay, that's the first principle to look at. This entire creation, whether it's the inner instrument that I have, whether it's this outer instrument and equipment that I possess as this body, whether it's this entire creation outside of me, everything is comprised of the 5 elements. What are the 5 elements? In order of the most gross level to the most subtle level: earth, water, fire, air, space. These are those 5 elements. Now, this is non-negotiable. There is no philosophical treatise on why these are the 5 elements. It just is this way. In their deepest meditations, rishis surmised these are the 5 elements right here. Now, what is interesting about the subtlety of these elements? How are we saying one is more subtle than the other? The framework that we look at is, how perceptible are they to us? Say, for instance, the earth element. Earth, you can see it. There is a texture to it. Taste is also there, that earth element. There is a smell, gandha, associated with it, as well as if you were to move it around, you can hear that earth move as well. All 5 senses can be honed in right there. Now we're saying the next most subtle element after earth is water. You can hear water, yes. A babbling brook, you can hear it. Water can have a texture as well, sapidity is there. There is a smell that it can possess. There is a sight functionality, you can see water. Water has no taste to it, however. Anytime you want any kind of liquid to have a taste, there must be something added in besides pure water. It's more subtle in that only 4 senses have that capability of reaching that element. Then you go to fire. With fire, yes, you can definitely see it. You can feel the heat of it. And you can hear the crackling of that fire as well. That's where it ends. As much as we say spicy food is burning my tongue, that is not that fire element we're talking about. Three senses have access to fire. Even more subtle, air. The thing about air is we can feel it on our skin. Sense of touch is there. If I'm indoors, like it was really windy here in Dallas yesterday, if I'm indoors, the only way I can tell that that air is having a lot of movement is if I see leaves or a tree or something get knocked over. That's only through inference right there. It's not that I can see the air. So hearing it and feeling it is all I have with air. And finally, there's space. Space is even more subtle than air in that no senses almost can reach it. The only way I know space is existing is because I have that capability of hearing. For sound waves to travel, there must be a vacuum. That is how we surmise that there is space as an element. So subtlety right here. Why did I go through subtlety? Because Pañcīkaraṇam is that process by which these 5 elements in their most subtle form become grossified and tangible. So this entire jagat around me of inanimate objects, this microphone that I have here, the glasses that I'm wearing right here, all of these inanimate objects, they are that tamasic amsha, meaning that tamasic layer of these 5 elements. That's what makes up this entire world around me. Then there is the Rajasic element, Rajasic Amsha of these 5 elements. That's what makes up what we call Karmendriyas. Karmendriyas meaning organs of action. Hands, legs, organ of speech, the genital organ of excretion. All of this is that Rajasic Amsha. And finally, that inner instrument, that functionality by which I can ascertain what is picked up by my 5 senses. This is called the Jnanendriyas, organs of knowledge. These are the Sattvic Amsha, the Sattvic layer of these elements. And it's no wonder that these are the designations given. That which is tamasic is inert, without any consciousness attributed to it, inanimate objects. That which is rajasic is of the frenetic nature of action. That which is sattvic is of the nature of knowledge. Therefore, this is what it takes. Now, there's some questions that are associated here that have to come up. That when we say subtle to gross, all of this, what transforms from subtle to gross here? If we say that Brahman, that substratum, is what transforms, we run into a philosophical mess right here. Because from the standpoint of principles, Brahman is immutable, meaning it does not change. If you're saying that Brahman goes through changes, going from that unmanifest form into the form of this tangible world around me, that means I go through changes, I perish someday. Brahman goes through changes, Brahman perishes someday. That doesn't fit. Therefore, the only answer here is Maya alone transforms from subtle to gross. What is Brahman's role in all of this then? Without that Brahman, Maya does not exist. Without Maya, Brahman does not express. I'll say that again. Without Brahman, Maya does not exist. Without Maya, Brahman does not express. Meaning Brahman does not go through any change. Because of that magical power of that Maya that's associated. And Maya's definition is Trigunatmika Maya. It's expressed as these 3 gunas, is how it expresses. That is what goes through all of these changes. Now you must be thinking, Hari Bhai, why are we going through all of this? Why does this matter? We're talking about our true selves here, and here you are going through these 3 layers and talking about how these elements grossify and they make up different amshas and all of this. Why is it? Because our goal here is to understand mithyatva of the world around me. Mithyatva meaning the unrealness, the falsity of it. That which is defined as real and unreal, that's our starting point here then for this question. We look at Srimad Bhagavad Gita, 16th shloka of the 2nd chapter. Bhagavan Krishna clearly details what is real versus what is unreal. Nasato vidyate bhavaha. That's the shloka that he starts with there. That which is real is present in all 3 periods of time. Past, present, and future. Where there is no time that it did not exist, there is no time in the future where it will not exist. Must be existent at all times. That's 1. Now, based on that definition, try to point to something that is real. Try to point to anything in your room right now. No. It has a date of creation, therefore a date of end is there for it as well. This human body, this inner instrument, all of these are susceptible to all those changes. Nothing is real. Now, this may seem like an arbitrary definition, but it's completely grounded in logic. Think about it from the example of waves coming out of the ocean. A wave comes out, has a distinct identity, and then crashes onto the shore again. When that wave was not manifest, we called it water. It's a part of the ocean. When that wave crashes back down, we call it water. It's a part of that ocean. Would it be wrong to call it water when it's in the form of that wave right there? No. We give it this distinct identity saying it's a wave. It's a special snowflake. It has these attributes to it. It rose this high. Yeah, cool. That was for a momentary period. It was water before. It was water when it was that wave. It goes back to being water right there. Therefore, giving it this identity of a wave is unreal in the grand scheme of things. Water is that only reality there. Similarly, giving this entire creation identity and names and forms, as fleeting as it is illogical. The source that it comes from, the source that it goes back to, that is the only reality. That is the only thing existing. That is the hallmark of the Advaita Vedantic philosophy. That which Pancadashi is grounded in. So the point of this whole exercise of Pañcīkaraṇam is to understand the unreality of the world around me. Because that which I experience, I think is real. In all walks of life, that which I experience is what I find to be real. Even hearsay is something that is hard to imagine. Imagine someone tells you your best friend in the whole wide world. Your best friend cheated someone or hit someone. You're not going to believe them. I mean, you might if your best friend has certain tendencies, but you're not going to believe it just because someone said it. You're going to want proof. I go through this with Balvihar parents all the time. Their kids misbehave, and I tell the parents, look, your kid did this in class, or they did this in a camp. The parents, with that attachment that they have, refuse to believe me. Without some kind of video proof or 20 other people corroborating the story, they refuse to believe what's being said. Seeing is believing, experiencing is believing, personally. That's the way we're wired. I cannot take that logic when it comes to this understanding, however. Simply saying I experience the world around me through my five senses, that does not make it real. Now, what is one framework we looked at in this text to recognize that unreality? The framework of avasthatraya, the three states of existence: waking, dream, and deep sleep. If you remember, this was several weeks ago. In that part of Pancadashi, when we went into it, the argument we looked at was, in the waking state, things are a certain way. In the dream state, they're completely different. Which is why when I wake up from a dream, I say, whatever was in the dream state is negated by the waking state. By that logic, whatever is in the waking state can be negated by the dream state, can't it? No, Hariji, what's in the waking state is more permanent, there's more consistency. Be that as it may, if we're going by the logic that one state negates the other, you can't give waking more power than the dream state. Clearly, one state of existence negates the other. There is no reality to any of these states. Carrying that same logic here, again, reality is not based on experience. Reality is based on fundamental principle. That's what we surmise from Pañcīkaraṇam. That's the first topic we look at going forward. What's the second topic that arises soon after? Śarīra-traya-viveka. Sharira, body, traya, three. Discretion and understanding through the three bodies. What are these three bodies? The first and most tangible layer that we can understand is this gross body layer. That which is made of the limbs and the blood and the flesh, that which is tangible and perceivable. That is the gross body right here. Sthula Sharira is what it's called in Sanskrit. The layer that is more subtle than that layer which is made up of those subtle elements that we talked about, houses the mind, houses where the counter of the sense organs is, meaning the sense organs, they don't experience on their own. There is that subtle layer needed to experience. The gross body has these sense organs that have access to the world, but their actual experience happens at that subtle layer. For example, if something pricks my skin, cuts my hand in some way, it's not the sense organ that feels that pain, it's something more subtle that feels that pain. That's the layer we're talking about, Sukshma Sharira, the subtle body. This also houses the pranas. Pranas meaning that layer where there are functions happening in the body that I don't necessarily have to control, they happen on their own. Digestion, breathing, circulation of blood, like that. That's all part of that subtle body. And then the most subtle layer beyond that is the causal body. Karana Sharira, causal body. Where this is the hardest one to understand. This is where that seed of individuality exists. This is the storehouse of my vasanas that trickle down as thoughts and desires into that subtle body. And this is that body which is responsible for me being ignorant. This is where that avidya is. This is where that delusion lies in my own individuality. That layer is where all of this is stored. Now, why is this analysis important of Śarīra-traya-viveka? When it comes to understanding the word I, what am I pointing at? This varies and changes. If I'm saying I am short, I am dark, I am fat, giving these different kinds of monikers, that I refers to Sthula Sharira, that gross body right there. When I say things like I am happy, I am sad, I have clarity, I don't know, I know, that refers to that subtle body, which houses that inner instrument. When I say I am this individuality, I am so-and-so, that refers to that causal body. Tendencies, everything lies there. So, the truth is, anytime I've attributed I, it actually is my gross body has pain. My subtle body has clarity, lack of clarity. That's what we should be saying, which would sound weird. But the point being, I'm wrong every time I attribute I to any of these things. Without understanding of Śarīra-traya-viveka, I cannot understand why I'm wrong when I attribute I to these different layers. That's the first thing I have to do. In my own verbiage to myself, do I understand that I, anytime I've used the word I'm not any of these things. I'm something far beyond them. This framework is how we understand that. Then the natural question that comes up here is, if I truly am the witness beyond these three bodies, what should my attitude towards birth, death, change, and suffering, what should that be? Because it's unreal, but I actually am going through it if you think about it. What should my attitude be then? From the highest standpoint, yes, all of that's unreal. From this vyavaharic standpoint, meaning that layer in which I transact with the world around me, it is very much real. And I should act accordingly. Understanding that these are layers that my three bodies have to go through, all the while knowing I am not truly the one being affected by all of this. I am something beyond all of it. Reality is nothing but how much attention I lend to something. The more attention I put on a problem, the more real it is to me. The more I think about something, the more reality there is. Is the point of my life to only be at this layer where I worry about these three bodies? Or is there that ultimate truth that I look to? Another question that comes up: how do these frameworks fit together? Okay, so that other framework we saw of waking, dream, and deep sleep. The waking state has to do with this gross body. That's solely what I'm functioning through in the waking state. Subtle body has to do with that dream state. In that dream state, I have no access to this gross body. It's only through that subtle body that there's any functionality. Deep sleep state is that causal body, where even though there is no access to the subtle body, I still don't perish. I still wake up as the same individual, meaning there is a body associated with that state as well. That is the causal body right there. So you see how these frameworks are all enmeshed together. None of them exists in a vacuum or exist independently, negating any other framework. They all come together beautifully in a harmony. So these different layers are so important to understand. Now, going forward, what are we going to find? One process, word to understand, is Anvaya Vyatireka. Anvaya Vyatireka refers to that process of presence and absence. In what way? When these functions are present of these different bodies, then I understand very clearly that they function in this transactional form. From that ultimate standpoint, their absence does not take away from this understanding of what my true nature is. That's what we'll dive into the next time we meet. Lokas are focused on that whole process right there. So with that, a bit of a shorter session today. I'm still getting my sea legs back. Stamina is still not where it should be. We'll have a longer session next time, but I wanted to outline all of this at least. Okay. Alrighty. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om Shri Guru Pyo Namaha. Harihi Om. Stay on.